Today we're continuing the story of Elijah in 1 Kings 17, and we're looking at verses 8 through 16. This is the heart of what I preached on yesterday, and if you didn't have a chance to watch the sermon, I hope you'll take the opportunity to do so. In this passage, in verses 8 through 16, Elijah now is told by the Lord to go to Zarephath, which belongs to Sidon. This is the region where Ahab's wife Jezebel, who is basically Elijah's arch enemy. God is saying to Elijah, I want you to go to the home territory of the woman who really despises you and wants you dead. Which again, you talk about, do you want to hear God's voice? Do you want to have to follow God's instruction? And he goes, and if that's not good news enough about where he's to go, God says, I've commanded a widow there to feed you. Well, a widow in a time of famine and drought is just a small step up from a raven as far as providing good food and meals for someone. And so Elijah, though, God bless him, he's obedient. He comes to the gate of the town. There's a widow gathering sticks in order to make a fire, and he makes a request for her to give him a little drink. And she was going to bring it, and he says, and bring me a morsel of bread in your hand. And she basically says, as the Lord your God lives, she recognizes that he is an Israelite. Elijah's not from around there. He doesn't share her faith. As the Lord your God lives, she says, I have nothing baked. She's down to her last handful of meal. She's down to her last little bit of oil in a jug. And she's going to use up her final bit of food and have a last supper for her and her son. And then she's expecting to starve to death. I mean, she is at a point of utter helplessness and desperation. She is totally at the end of her rope. And then in verse 13, which is our verse for the day, it says, Elijah said to her, do not be afraid. Go and do as you have said. But first, make me a little cake of it and bring it to me. And afterwards, make something for yourself and your son. Now think about how difficult that request is. Can you imagine a stranger, someone you've never seen before in your life, coming to you, and you're a widow, you're at the very end of your food supply, you have enough to make one small meal for you and your son, and this stranger comes to you, not from your community, doesn't even share your faith, and says, before you and your son eat any of it, make some and give it to me. How would you feel? Would you want to answer that request? It's important in the story not just to see the trust and dependence of Elijah, but also the trust and the obedience of the widow. And she does what the man of God says. And Elijah's promise that as long as she basically puts God first, the jar of meal will not be emptied and the jug of oil will not fail until the day that the Lord sends rain on the earth. And she went and did as Elijah said, so that she, as well as he and her household, ate for many days. And the jar of meal never emptied, the jug of oil never failed, according to the word of the Lord, spoken through Elijah. Sometimes God asks you to do things that seem difficult, and yet responding in faith, responding in trust, even when it's hard, may be the key that opens up the floodgates of God's blessing for you.